So the United States, again, is blessed with this rich diversity of schools, whereas the Ivy Leagues actually were initially founded as schools of ministry, and then they grew into liberal arts colleges, research universities, and mostly dropped their affiliation with a religious denomination, which you described. But state universities mostly were not founded to train ministers. They were founded to train citizens, to train people, lay people. So the University of North Carolina, for example, never had a school of theology. And what you end up with then is, the campus is 25% Catholic, and a lot of them are Christian, but they're at a public university, which doesn't have a school of theology. So I guess my question is, this is more of the case with you, more the University of Minnesota. Is there actually an official school of theology anywhere at the University of Minnesota? And has there ever been?
There isn't and there hasn't, and you're exactly right. A lot of these private institutions that came out of schools for ministers still have divinity schools. So Duke, for instance, Harvard has a divinity school, Chicago. But you're right, the public research institutions mostly don't, but a lot of them do have. In fact, I can't think off the top of my head of any. Can you, Margarita, that have a school of theology? Public?
I don't know for sure, so I don't want to misspeak, but most of the divinity schools are with universities that were founded as Christian institutions. Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth noting, John Henry Newman in his book, The Idea of a University, really argues for theology as a branch of knowledge. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, theology has only been considered a branch of knowledge in universities that are Christian or once were Christian. Mm-hmm. And theology became a specialized field, which is part of what Newman was trying to push back on, that it shouldn't be. But then the question then becomes at a public secular university, and this used to come up at the University of North Carolina, we can't have a theology department because we can't teach a confessional point of view.
Right.
We can't promote a single point of view. And so I think when I talk with administrators here at Princeton University or North Carolina, what has ended up happening is that they've created a diverse, pluralistic environment with a lot of religious backgrounds, but there's actually not a space to discuss those beliefs. Mm-hmm. So they end up becoming privatized in a way. And and students say this to me here at Princeton University, you might have a Muslim friend or a Buddhist friend, but nobody's talking about that. And it's interesting to me that my roommate at Yale that I lived with for 3 years, she was Jewish, and she did her Jewish thing on Friday night, and I did, Friday and Saturday, and I did my Catholic thing on the weekends, and we had a great time living together. And we never talked about our faith. Now we do, 25 years later. But it was kind of almost like this, well, that's your thing and I have my thing, And I had one secular Jewish student in an undergraduate class that I taught. And she said, this was here at Princeton University. She said, I came here so interested to learn about religious diversity. And my Muslim friend, my Catholic friend, and my Hindu friend, as soon as they get to Princeton, they stop actually practicing their religion. So they have nothing to tell me. And so my point was, I think the reality of people being diverse and actually engaging around that diversity they're different things. And sometimes having a center that's called the Jewish Center or the Christian Center or the Catholic Center, people of other faiths can walk in there and know that, okay, I'm going to encounter somebody who's going to tell me the Christian story now. And I do think, although there's a risk of imposing one's view, I also think there's a genuine curiosity. Like, what is the Muslim story? And what is the Buddhist story? What is the Jewish story? Where can I go learn that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's a common refrain that I hear all the time at the university is faculty, that will have served in the same department for 10 years or more, but they had no idea that their colleagues had a faith life because there's just it doesn't come up. There's no space for it within the university. And back to your original question about the relationship to theology within the university. So Minnesota does not have a school of theology, but it does have religious studies. So the difference being, as you said, not a confessional approach to religion, but a descriptive, from my understanding, sort of the origin of religious studies, an attempt to sort of present a descriptive and objective account of religion rather than a sort of confessionally motivated one. So, have really wonderful relationships with faculty that teach in religious studies, encourage our students to take classes in, the history of Christianity, history of religion, things like that. But you're right that a space for sort of theologically motivated reflection within the university doesn't exist. And so one of the things that I think Anselm House brings is the creation of that space for Christian faculty, but for faculty of all faiths and no faiths too. So one of the things that we've heard from, so we've been doing some of these faculty roundtables as well within the university, and they've been really well received because, first of all, it's a beautiful expression of hospitality to the university to say, come enjoy a meal with your colleagues. We know that there's not a lot of opportunity to get to know one another at that sort of very relational level of sharing a meal. So just that alone, I think, is important. But then a lot of faculty have said there's just no space within either my department or the university as a whole to talk about these really big questions that transcend disciplinary boundaries and, transcend the sort of technical questions that the university spends so much of its time on. And I got into academia because I wanted to talk about like big, meaningful things. And so, even though I don't share your views, thank you for making space for me to talk to other people about those things. And I think that's a beautiful gift that Christian study centers can offer.